How did life emerge from non-life? Have scientists really proved that lifeless chemicals can naturally form into living cells all on their own? I'm Thomas Westbrook, and I have been obsessed with the origin of life for well over a decade. So I sought out chemists, biologists, and physicists to create this series and explore just how many of the pieces of this puzzle have already been solved. What are you? See, you aren't just one living thing. You are a colony of approximately 37.2 trillion cells. Each of these cells is organized and built using DNA, the same natural coding mechanism found in every single living organism on Earth. The more similar that two organisms are, the more DNA they have in common. That's why you share more DNA with a chimp than with a lemur, and even less with a single-celled euglena. Scientists studying the Earth's geological layers have found that as they dig deeper, the further back in time they look, the simpler the fossilized organisms become. Life used to be simple. But if we go far enough back, can life naturally arise from non-life? Now, I'm not talking about the Aristotelian notion of spontaneous generation that assumed putting rags and wheat in a jar would magically turn into mice when no one was looking. This was disproven in part by Francisco Redi in the 1600s and later by Louis Pasteur in the 1800s. What we're going to explore is the theory of abiogenesis, the theory that in the right circumstances, simple chemicals can naturally bond together and form organic molecules, which organize themselves into living, evolving structures called cells. Given a big enough time span and enough generations, can we get all the way from chemicals to humans? In order to answer that, we need to know what living organisms are made of. Up until the 1800s, there was a common misconception that life possessed some kind of vital force. This was different from the notion of a soul. It was believed that all living things possessed this force and that organic material couldn't be generated synthetically in a lab. Until, in 1828, Friedrich Wöhler did just that, synthesizing urea in a laboratory, putting an end to the false notion of vitalism. See, urea is an organic waste product, and it was long believed that it could only be produced by living organisms, until Wöhler's experiments showed that that was not the case. Life is chemistry, and all of the energy that you run on comes from chemical reactions which are taking place in your body. Since Wöhler's experiments, there have been many attempts to create entire living organisms in a lab. In the early 2000s, Martin Hanczyc and his team created simple protocells that moved around in a petri dish, responded to stimuli, sought out food, and underwent cell splitting, similar to reproduction. But these were very simplistic and even lacked the DNA necessary to pass traits from one generation to the next. But in 2010, Craig Venter and his team did something that sounds like a science fiction movie. They synthesized an entire genome from scratch. They dropped it inside of a cell and watched it reproduce using nothing but that lab-made DNA. They called it JVI Syn 1.0, demonstrating yet again that life is nothing but chemistry. Then they went further. By 2016, they had stripped a cell's genome down to the bare metal, just 473 genes, the smallest genome of any free living cell we know of. But there was a hitch. These minimal cells could reproduce, but they divided into lumpy, bizarre, unpredictable blobs. So, in 2021, the team zeroed in on just 7 genes that once added back, snapped cell division right back into clean, uniform copies. In other words, they didn't just build a cell, they reverse engineered the precise chemical instructions a cell follows to split in two. But I want to dig a little deeper and get a closer look of what cells are actually made of. Inside of every living cell are metabolic networks, the non-stop chemical reactions that keep that cell alive. Those networks run on enormous molecules called macromolecules or polymers. Poly just means many, so a polymer is nothing more than a long chain built from a bunch of smaller repeating links called monomers, like a freight train that's built out of repeating boxcars. And the monomers are themselves just organic molecules, the kind that you probably met back in chemistry class. Let's break that down a little more simply. But before I do, long-form educational videos like this take a massive amount of time and research and effort, and they're not cheap to produce. They also perform abysmally on YouTube. I just brought this series back and have been kind of remaking some of my old videos and adding to this series because I think it's one of the most important series for people to see just how many of the puzzle pieces we have for the origin of life and how life got here. I think that resources resources like this really need to be out there, and this information needs to be accessible, but the only way that I'm able to do it is with support from viewers like you. Lately, my Patreon has been taking a massive dip, and I don't expect these videos to go viral or to be paid for through AdSense alone. So if you go to Patreon, you can make a per video pledge and let me know that it's because of this series that you're supporting my work, just to let me know that you want me to keep making these videos. Thank you. Now back to the video. So you're made of chemistry, but what are all of these macromolecules made of? Now, there are 4 organic molecules found in every living organism: carbohydrates, lipids, nucleic acids, and proteins. These are the building blocks of life, and every one of these building blocks is simply a different arrangement of atoms. In the case of carbs, simple elements like hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon form simple sugars called monosaccharides, which then make up more complex polysaccharides. For lipids, simple elements, predominantly hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon, form fatty acids and glycerol. These bond together to form triglycerides, or fat molecules. Swap out one of the fatty acids for a phosphate group, and you get a phospholipid, the very molecule that builds your cell membranes. With nucleic acids, hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus come together to form nucleotides, which bond together to form nucleic acids. And lastly, for proteins, simple elements like hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, and nitrogen, and sometimes sulfur, make up amino acids, which link together to make polypeptide chains. Once you have these 4 building blocks for life, they can work together, form various structures, and play vital roles for every living organism. For example, when a polypeptide chain gets long enough, these chains naturally fold into structures called proteins that carry out vital functions like speeding up chemical reactions, forming antibodies, and providing structural scaffolding. The laws of physics are constant. If life can come from non-life, we should be able to recreate physical simulations of early Earth-like environments and watch these steps from simplicity to complexity happen on their own. Now, there very well may be several different paths that life can arise naturally by, so this wouldn't necessarily tell us which simulation represents exactly how life came from non-life, but it would at least show us that it's possible. So, what steps in this process have been recreated in labs or observed in simulations? I'll cover that in my next video. Until then, dare to be curious, but don't drink the Kool-Aid. Want more great content like this? Check out this video, quick, before the video ends.